This episode of the Fine Homebuilding podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. If you're a window installer, you deserve a simple choice: Andersen 400 Series windows. They're the windows contractors trust the most, based on a 2022 survey of U.S. contractors. Probably because they have fewer callbacks and extra peace of mind. And thanks to shortened lead times, they're available faster. Make your go-to windows Andersen 400 Series. Request a quote at andersenwindows.com.
Outside of the foundation to allow yourself to dig it out and put a new foundation in. It would just be a better version of those YouTube videos where they show like 400 Amish guys pick up a barn and walk down the road.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Fine Homebuilding Editorial Director Andrew Zellner.
Morning, Patrick.
Operations Manager for TDS Custom Construction, Ian Schwant.
Morning.
And our producer, Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it's great to see you guys. What have you been up to? Ian, you want to go first?
We spent the whole weekend landscaping and working in the garden, and I learned how to hill potatoes.
What does that mean?
I guess you have to mound dirt around them as they continue to grow out of the ground. So I did a bunch of that with Sarah and put in a lot of her dahlia tubers that should have gone in 3 or 4 weeks ago, but we were busy planning a gigantic party and she started a new job. So glad we got it in before it was 100-something degrees over the last 2 days.
Oh my God. So we were talking ahead of the show, and you guys have had quite the change in the weather. Andrew, you said it was, 45 degrees on the weekend, or was that you, Ian?
There was 45 by me on Saturday, and I had 108 on the car driving home yesterday at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, it was just like a very quick shift, almost like overnight. We went from like mid 60s to like 90s and 100.
I don't know that I've ever really been in 100-degree temperatures, maybe for very brief periods of time, but that's got to be really dangerous to be outside, is my guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Especially the first time it happens in the summer by us.
And was it really humid too?
It wasn't. I mean, it was. I felt it didn't feel any more humid than a typical summer, but.
Humidity to Andrew and I is like the cold. It's just a given natural part of this time of year that you just build up an immunity to, or you die off.
Yeah, I just keep a nice layer of moisture on me at all times during the summer.
Our office is slab on grade, and it was so humid in here earlier this week. There was like a wet slick of condensation on the whole slab throughout the office.
Because there's no way that thing is gonna. People talk about thermal mass and how it's a good thing. Well, sometimes it's not, right?
Yeah.
So there's no way that slab is gonna change in temperature as quickly as the air temperature.
No, we had all the windows open, and it's like, what do we do? Do we just turn the AC on full blast? And it wasn't all that warm out yet. It was just the humidity building up.
Well, I have to commend you all for living in the Midwest, you guys and listeners too, because it seems like the temperature swings are hard to take.
Yeah, we can't all live in Greenwich, right, Patrick? There's just not enough space there.
Yeah, I don't think. Do you ever leave conditioned space, Patrick?
In the summertime, it's gonna be at the right time of day. I
Do you take a sun umbrella out with you when you go outside?
Well, he has someone to hold it for him, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't you guys walk around with a parasol? Andrew, what have you been doing? You working on your place?
Yeah. And sort of fits and starts. I framed up a bunch of walls in my basement, and the lumber choices at Home Depot when I did it weren't spectacular. You're getting the last few sticks in the bundle, and so I swapped out a few studs that had like twisted on me like super crazy. And that was fun, but it is also like, I mean, now a new stud is like $4, and they were like $8 when I bought them, so it was like throwing $8 in the garbage. But
so maybe you answered it, but so are you the kind of person who's going to take your wonky studs back to the home center in exchange for better ones, or do you just like they become kindling?
I've a few of them I cut down and like into shorter pieces because I have a few spots in the basement that just need like some blocking and stuff.
Sure.
But also in the Midwest, we also have Menards, which they're always running this 11% off rebate that Home Depot matches, and there's a Home Depot closer to my house than Menards. And so, like, I'd already submitted my rebates for this lumber, and it, like, would turn into a big thing if I tried to return just one stud. So
you actually have to end up paying Menards for the convenience of the loyalty program. I see.
Yeah. Patrick, I saw your friend Matt Kenny posted something on Instagram, and he took what looked like kind of a nasty looking 2x8 or 2x10, and he resawed it on, I can't remember if it was his bandsaw or table saw, and then edge glued all the pieces and made it, turned it into like a really nice looking quarter sawn grain piece of spruce. It was pretty impressive. I think Andrew could do that with all of his wonky studs.
Matt Kenny's efforts are always impressive. I don't know that they're the most time efficient, but they are. He does make beautiful things, no doubt about it.
I shouldn't be resawing my studs, so I've got quarter sawn grain on all the faces.
Jeff, what have you been doing? You sent us amazing photos of it. Is it your nephew's Barndominium?
Yeah. So I was traveling this weekend. Went to my great nephew's wedding.
Did you officiate this one?
I did not officiate.
Okay.
I was purely a spectator.
Did you deliver notes for the officiant?
I took notes.
Okay.
That was an amazing space. What a cool building.
Yeah, it is remarkable, and it's just I get so jealous. I'm just because sitting on the porch, looking up at the ceiling, and seeing 2x10 16s without a single knot in it.
Wow, where did those come from? I mean,
it's just southern yellow pine. It's just.
So we should tell folks this is a long, gable building, right, with a lean-to on the eave side. That's the full length of it, and the building looks like it's 60 feet.
Yeah, on both sides. So.
Oh, yeah.
So one side is like a big open porch. And the other side is, right now he's got a big camper that they lived in while they were building the place. And his Kubota and all the other sundry things that...
I got to say, it makes me want a Barndominium more than anything has ever has. Yeah. So how big is their living space in there? Do you know?
It's the full width. So the main part of it's probably about a third of the building. 2 stories. So he and his wife live downstairs basically. So they've got a living room, kitchen area, then a bedroom, bathroom. And then upstairs are 2 rooms where their daughter lives in one of them. And one of them is right now just storage, but it could be converted into another bedroom.
What made them want to have a Barndominium lifestyle?
I really don't know. Because 20 years ago, when he lived in Connecticut, he was Mr. Preppy. So that's kind of a nice transition.
Yeah, I don't see how those connect, but, we get older and change.
Yeah.
Would zoning in Greenwich even allow a Barndominium?
It has to look like a greenhouse.
Well, for the horses, yes. But
yeah. What do you guys think of this? Is this appealing to you, Ian, Andrew?
So as a man with many hobbies, and I'd like a wood shop and like a space where I could do some metal work, and then a space where I can play loud music. It seems like such an efficient building with like huge clear spans that you could basically do anything inside of. I think I could get used to living inside of it, but I don't think I could get used to like pulling up to it and like not feeling like I was entering some, like industrial.
It looks like an equipment shed or or a paint warehouse. Yeah.
I can see the appeal in it, but I'm always shocked to find out that men live there with their wives.
I feel like the four of us could live in one together, but yeah.
So I showed Carol this building yesterday, and she was into it because she has messy hobbies, I'm going to say just out loud. I think it would be perfect for us.
I think Joanne was one of the motivating factors. So
Yeah.
That's what surprises me the most.
So I did maybe one of the nerdiest things in my entire life this past weekend, and I labeled both my electrical panel and the barn electrical panel so far as to make an Excel spreadsheet, Ian, to facilitate this. And I was talking about this to my neighbor, and I told her that, I've never done this or lived in a place that had such a complete legend for the electrical circuits.
Did you have your son on the cell phone just going around the house telling you what you had just turned off?
So as not to create too much turmoil in the family unit, I waited till Liam and Carol went to the Elephant's Trunk on Sunday morning, and I did this while they were gone. Fortunately, my house is little, and it's only one set of stairs connecting the electrical panel to the living space. So I got to say I got my 10,000 steps on Sunday, but I did most of it myself. He did help me figure out one circuit where he had to yell when the light turned off.
Did you also label your outlet covers and switch plate covers
with numbers?
Yeah.
So no. But I think that's a fantastic idea. So what Andrew's talking about is you take off your wall plates and you put the number of the circuit on the back side with a Sharpie marker, and I think that's a really smart thing to do. And I still might do that, Andrew. Maybe on a rainy day or one that's 108.
I mean, as far as home improvement goes, that's fairly low on the priority list, but I feel like it would make future home improvements so much easier,
I got to thinking about how long it would take to isolate a circuit for, adding on or replacing a device or whatever. And my best guess was it was like 6 minutes. So the 4 hours I spent doing this, as you can imagine, was probably not the best use of my time. But sometimes you do things just because it makes you feel good, right?
Absolutely.
Once the panel got installed at our house, even Sarah opened up the panel and she's like, wow, it'll be really nice to know what every one of these does, as opposed to our old house, which had them all scratched off and taped over many, many times.
Jeff, have you ever lived in a place with an adequately identified electrical panel?
Nope.
No. Andrew?
This house isn't too bad.
Not too bad. No. Andrew?
No, and it was close when we moved in, but we had to install some electric radiant baseboard heating, and they just reshuffled things and didn't move any labels. And so I can sort of visualize and go back in the steps of oh, I did that thing that one time and it turned out it was this, which makes me think I should write it down, but we'll see.
Yeah. Folks, I'd love to hear about your electrical panel labeling experiences, whether you've lived in a house, whether you've done it yourself, whether you find it to be a problem. I'm guessing a lot of folks don't really care.
Do you feel like now that you've labeled your electrical panel, the next step is to add some sort of monitoring there so you can track your usage and what's going on, or is that not appealing to you?
I don't care enough, Andrew. I would love to know how much electricity my refrigerator uses, but that is simply a matter of connecting my multimeter to it with, an amp clamp. So, the monitoring stuff, I don't know. My electric bill tells me how much electricity I use every month.
it's a slippery slope between starting to monitor and then deciding that, you know, your wife and son need to use this little electric heater because it's a more efficient use of energy for that afternoon.
Yeah, I pick my battles. Boy, once again, we got some great feedback from listeners. This comes from our friend Dack. Hello, FHB podcast. Regarding the SketchUp discussion in episode 465, here is something for listeners and perhaps Patrick to consider. Take a SketchUp course at the technical college. I took one this spring at Hennepin Tech here in Minneapolis. Did I say that right, Andrew?
You did. I didn't know Dack was local.
In this case, it was a 1-year subscription to SketchUp Pro was included in the course price of $450. So the instruction was $150. While I ended up learning a lot more from YouTube, it was super valuable for learning the basics, and the assignments ended up being a lot of fun. Just a thought, Dack. Well, I could also say that we're having a SketchUp course at Fine Homebuilding, right, Andrew?
Yeah, I think we're right in the middle of it, but we're planning to run it every year at least. And it's more focused on woodworking, which I think gets into some of the next letter here.
And right now, I just re-upped my subscription to SketchUp. I had let it lapse after I finished designing my house, but I need to do a full set of drawings for the outbuilding that we want to do. And I got an email that they were running a pretty good special on it for the month of June. I think it was $50 or $60 off for the summer.
How long did it take you to learn that program, Ian, with proficiency?
Quite a while. There was a pretty good learning curve to it. I did a lot of webinars and books. I didn't do what Dack did and take a class or anything, but I watched this YouTube series of an architect doing an entire house natively from scratch. Skipping over parts that didn't matter to me, but that helped me a lot. I found it's really just a handful of commands that once you know them and know the keyboard command for them, as opposed to clicking around with the mouse, it's pretty intuitive.
Was it dozens of hours, is it fair to say, to become good at it?
Oh,
dozens.
Yeah, definitely. And our house was, it's house 13 version 4. So it's,
You had a good period to get good at it.
Yeah. A lot of them didn't make it past the bulk modeling stage in SketchUp, but each one, started as a square with a roof and some windows drawn on it. And I think 3 of them got fleshed out to full models.
Are you considering offering the Ian Plan book of home designs?
No, because it would be pretty hard to follow. It'd be pretty esoteric.
More on the subject of design software comes from John. He says, hello, Fine Homebuilding podcast crew. I thought I'd chime in on the design software question Paul raised in episode 465. Here's my twisted journey to a process that works for me. In 2019, my daughter bought a home with the intent of reconfiguring a hallway to create a laundry room and address a questionable design concept from 1999, the idea of building a massive cavity into a wall for the big screen TV. It's a huge waste of space that hasn't aged well. Like Paul, we started the design process the old-fashioned way with paper, pencil, and a drafting board. While we sucked at accurately measuring room dimensions, it was going to take forever to simply create the as-built plan, and the cost of erasers and paper was getting excessive. SketchUp 2017 looked like a reasonable alternative to paper and pencil. It's free, still is, and there are lots of YouTube how-to videos available. Forget that notion. I'm surprised you didn't hear me yell, no, when it was brought up on the podcast. SketchUp is a volume editing program. You essentially create 3D objects and place them next to each other. A fine tool for modeling components and assemblies, and in my opinion, architectural visualization is not in its wheelhouse. I could make it work, but free does not justify the hours required to coax something out of the tool. Time isn't really free. What to do? We thought we got lucky when we discovered the city had the builder's plan on file. We filed the appropriate forms. The city requested permission from the architect to release the plans, and 2 weeks later, we had the as-built drawing. Outstanding. We'll make some copies annotate the changes, and get on with it. Nope. The plans are copywritten. We would need to redraw them, otherwise the city would reject the permit request. Back to square one, but at least we had accurate dimensions to create the drawing. Surprise, the builder's plan indicated there was a shear wall where we planned to place a door. Time to find a structural engineer. The pressure was on to find a tool to create the required drawings for a permit. Considered taking a class at the local community college, but most classes provide student licenses to install a copy of the software at home, and then there's an instructor to ask questions if I needed help with the tool. If the next semester hadn't been a couple months off, I would have gone that way. Instead, I paid the $500 and bought Home Designer Pro and haven't looked back. Within 1 week, I was able to create the as-built drawing, develop a number of potential design options, create renderings for my daughter to review, select an option, and create a baseline drawing. The drawings were passed to the structural engineer, and he provided the drawing for new shear wall and required Simpson connectors. While the structural engineer was doing his thing, I spent a couple of long weekends reading and sorting out what I need to do next to meet California's Title 24 energy requirements, and was able to extract what I needed to call out on the drawings. Who writes these requirements, and can they get any more confusing? COVID shutdown hits, the sitting planning office all but shuts down, no one is available to ask questions, and plans have to be submitted via a dead drop. Call a number and leave the package by the door. As a testament to the Home Designer Pro capability to generate construction documents, the permit was approved with only one minor change to add a note. Making the correction wasn't any harder than adding a line of text and pressing print. My current tool chain is model with Home Designer Pro, develop the cabinet and trim drawings with SketchUp 2017, and then build. I'll continue using Home Designer Pro to flesh out design ideas and use SketchUp to develop shop drawings for trim and cabinets, but I may move to SolidWorks because it's so much more intuitive and capable. Sorry for the long-winded email, but it's been quite an adventure, John. Well, John, thank you for all the time you put into that and explaining your journey. I think that was interesting.
Yeah, I think where he landed with SketchUp is sort of how I've used the tool most, is sort of building smaller projects virtually to like work out the kinks. And then there are some cool plugins to generate cut lists and, you know, all that stuff. And his modeling and then how it turned out in real life, those pictures are great.
Incredible, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very professional, is all I can say. It's just, It looks like it's supposed to. Ian, what did you think about his criticism of SketchUp and that it's a 3D model program not ideally suited to designing homes?
I think that it comes from what people think they're going to get out of a program and the level of exactness that they're looking for. I personally find the renderings, like what Home Designer or Chief Architect, the main program, can do, I personally find them almost useless to me as a carpenter. I understand them as a sales and design tool to be able to make sure that you're speaking directly to someone who can't visualize a project in the same way the person building it or creating it can. But I think it really comes down to what level of information you need out of the program. I tell our carpenters in the field, do not look at the renderings. The renderings are not there to tell you what to build. The actual elevation drawings and floor plans and things like that are what's telling you what to build, which SketchUp can do that using the layout program really well. And at a pretty low cost. So I agree with him, but I think that what it provides is good enough for what would be real sets of home drawings.
More on this. This comes from Dave of Black Cat Builders in Vermont. Hi, Patrick and friends. I thoroughly enjoyed the last bunch of podcasts I've listened to. I got a little behind during the pandemic because I usually listen while driving to and from the job site, so I've been catching up as the bonkers busy winter gives way to the bonkers busier spring and summer building season, which is in full swing now. I've been thinking about the current state of things cost-wise. I was speaking with a real estate person who told me they're seeing new construction in Vermont clocking in at $500 per square foot. My jaw broke into a lot of little pieces. It hit the floor so hard. And apparently this is for entry-level home housing. So a middle-of-the-road 1,400 square foot house now sells for $700,000. Say it ain't so. If you'll permit a personal anecdote, this got me thinking about contractor honesty. When hopeful clients ask me if I think prices will come down next year or the year after, I'll usually say, no, probably not, at least not much. But in a year or two, you'll be used to the new costs and it won't feel as bad to pay so much. I get looks of dismay at this, so I continue. Remember when gas was, fill in the blank, and then it was, fill in the blank, minus 15 cents? It felt better, right? Still super expensive, but better. All of a sudden, at this point in the conversation, they understand human psychology a little more like how I understand it, and they say, well, that's a very honest answer. We share a little laugh and discuss their hopes and dreams for their projects and more, because if we didn't, we'd just be crying. You all are doing a great job with the podcast. Keep it up. Cheers and good luck as well. If you're wondering if I land any of these jobs, the answer is almost always yes. I don't know why, and I have only had two projects apply the brakes due to rising costs. I don't understand any of it, honestly.
Dave's a great Instagram follow. I follow him on Instagram. He does some pretty cool projects up there in your former neck of the woods, Patrick.
You know, Dave, like so many Vermonters, is so practical, and I just love that, right? It's just...
When we were looking for our house, this was 4 or 5 years ago now, you know, we had our range we were looking at. We weren't finding anything we wanted, you know, too much work. And so, like, we bumped the range up a little bit, and it was still affordable, and it opened up more possibilities. But, like, our realtor and a couple of folks we talked to, just like looking for advice, having never bought a home before, you know, it's so much money. You know, it's the most money you're ever going to spend on anything, especially the first time. And the interesting point was like, well, are you planning to live there for a couple of years, or are you planning to live there for 10 years or 20 years? And then I realized, you know, it's the cheapest it's going to be for me right now. Like, I can't ask my parents what they paid for their house, or, you know, even friends who bought a few years earlier, because, like, prices will continue to go up. And so the best time to buy is 10 years ago, and the second best time to pay for these things is right now, with the caveat that, like, we may be at a weird point in time.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You know, there are points when housing prices have gone up and then corrected, and corrected means fall. Let's be clear about that.
But over the long term, you know, they're still higher than they were before the fall.
It's interesting, like, I've been in this business, you know, to see, I think I would describe 3 different booms and busts. And, you know, this seems like a boom time, but maybe it's different. This comes from Sean. Hi, FHB podcast. I'm writing in response to Nate's comments about upgrading to a heat pump for hydronic heating. I know a lot of passive house builders are using the Sanden CO2 split heat pump water heater. The tank is stainless steel and sits inside while the actual heat pump is outside. It's not like the typical heat pump water heater where everything is stacked in one unit. They make some larger models too, up to 119 gallons. Apparently this device can get up to 175 degrees maximum temperature. Since the heat pump is outside, you gain some efficiencies by not dumping the cold air back into the room, and it can leverage the temperature differentials. Candidly, these units are expensive and would require some additional engineering, as the water would need to be recirculated and not just dumped down the drain like a typical hot water tank. I'm also not sure how expensive this would be to operate compared to other options mentioned on the show. It might be possible to do an integration of the hot water heater at the same time, which would be helpful with lowering energy costs of a natural gas or electric water heater. No matter what Nate does, always check for tax incentives. Thanks, Sean. Sean has some letters after his name. JD, MBA, Masters of Business Administration. Does anyone know what a JD is?
It's a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, All right, Sean. What do you think about this sand and water heater to make hydronic heating?
Things like the golden toilet of water heaters.
Okay.
So I think,
Do you want to
you
elaborate?
should qualify that,
What-
Ian.
It's like $6,000 for a water heater.
Yeah. I've only seen one in the wild. I've never. It's a
golden
rare
toilet?
thing.
Golden
it's-
toilet or a Sanden?
It's
A
the
Sanden.
unicorn.
Yeah.
It's the unicorn of a water heater. Then if you've only ever seen it once, cool idea. I'm sure you'd get mad cool kid passive house points if you put it in your house. But whoa, there's got to be a better way.
Well,
Like with my water, it would be a criminal to put my water through this beautiful thing, right?
I think so. I think about. I've been thinking a lot about hydronic underfloor radiant heating because
You have it.
Well, I'm working on it. I'm doing it. I'm experimenting with my own house, which I guess I have to do, and or I can only afford to do, and underfloor heat. You don't want to get it anywhere near the boiler temperature. So like you need to have a mixing valve, or a hot water heater is like right in the sweet spot of especially radiant underfloor heat. But it's never going to get hot enough to use your old cast iron radiators. Like you need to re-engineer that. And so thinking about the heat pump external, I mean, it's appealing, but it's crazy expensive. You could buy, 6, 8 electric water heaters over the course of your life.
You could line them all up, right?
Yeah.
You could, and
Pre-buy them.
Yeah, you could have them stocked, ready to swap in, when one dies.
yeah, I don't know. Jeff, have you heard of these things?
Oh yeah, but here I'm just
Yeah, in the weird era of the podcast, right? Yeah. If you have one of these things, I'd love to hear about your experience, or if you've put one in. What
And
was
we
it
want
like?
to see pictures. We
Yeah,
need
totally.
photographic evidence of its existence.
Just like the unicorn or the Yeti.
Or Bigfoot or whatever.
Oh man, so you had an interesting question, Ian, and I'm gonna let you take it from here. But you had a couple conversations, I'm guessing, over the weekend that made you consider building science in a whole new way.
Yeah. So just even at my housewarming party, I have a few members of my family that are in building trades and have dabbled in house flipping, et cetera. And they all talk to me a lot about heat rising and, the idea of, well, you have your in-floor heat and, you have your big high ceilings and, heat rises, so that's probably fine. It's not that big of a deal. And it just seemed to be this refrain that people were talking to me about for some reason at my house. And then we have 2 jobs going at TDS where we have radiant heat tubing in the ceilings of these houses. And
everyone's like, how the hell does that work?
right. But so we had a radiant heat specialist out at one of them, and he went on this long kind of diatribe about heat rising, and that's a stupid idea, and that can't work, and it's not efficient. And it made me think back to, I think it was the class that I took at Joe Stiebrick's place outside of Boston, where he stood up and very angrily surmised that heat doesn't rise. Heat moves from warm to cold, just like moisture moves from wet to dry. It's only certain types of heated air that rise. Heat itself does not rise specifically in most cases. So it got me thinking about it more and thinking about like, wow, I should really be able to explain this better, even better than I'm explaining this question now. So I started looking around and found that article that I sent to all of you as probably the better explanation that I've found recently. So I'm interested to hear, the experiences that certainly you, Patrick, have had talking to people about heat, and especially your anti-radiant bias that you have.
Well, so isn't the simple explanation is that it's warm air rises, not heat?
Yeah.
It's if you have air, it's going to stratify into warmer and cooler layers, right?
Right.
And isn't it true that humid air is also more buoyant than dry air, correct?
Right. Which is interesting because, I think Tiger Woods once said something about being able to hit a golf ball further in Florida than you can in Colorado, which is counterintuitive. People think the lighter air means that you could hit something like that further, but it actually travels with less friction through the buoyant air. So that's another thing that makes you think about some of these things that you hear about HVAC stuff a little bit differently when, humid air is really heavy or whatever somebody might say about it.
How are we so indoctrinated with this, bad information? I mean, why is it so pervasive? Anyone?
I feel like the laws of thermodynamics are often counterintuitive, and you don't think about this every day like we all do.
People don't think about this every day, really?
No, I mean, you only think about it when you notice something's wrong, and thankfully, most houses in the United States are pretty okay.
I think part of it might come from you grow up in this old drafty house, right? And that in the summertime it's sweltering upstairs, and it may or may not be in the wintertime too.
Yeah, you just start rationalizing it and just kind of buying into your own explanation and moving on. But it was really interesting to talk to some people that I felt otherwise should have had better information. Just
like your heating contractor,
like the heating contractor.
Well, and it's also one of those things where it also gets in the way when you're actively trying to solve a problem. But
Right.
We also know correlation isn't causation, so you could do something that makes your problem solved, but it's not the thing that actually solved it.
Right, and that was actually the context that we were discussing it with the heating guy, because we're putting heat in the tile floor in the bathroom, which also has the radiant heat in the ceiling. And the heating guy's point was, well, it's fine because that stuff in the ceiling's not doing anything, because that heat's just rising into the attic. And it's like, well, wait a minute, not exactly. It's radiating outward to wherever it's colder. But I think it also gets into the thermodynamic points of insulation, where you have your higher need for insulation is in places like Andrew and I live, where you can get 20 below zero design temps because you've got 20 below outside and you've got an interior house temp of say 70, you've got a 90-degree temperature swing that you're trying to keep up with. Whereas when Andrew and I have 100 and something degree heat, it's maybe only 25 or 30 degree temp.
Okay, I want to know how you get through HVAC school without a fundamental understanding of heat flow. I mean, isn't that fundamentally what an HVAC contractor is dealing with in a house, right? It's a flow of energy. And how can you not get a basic understanding of these mechanisms?
I think you end up with a basic understanding of the mechanics, right? You understand how to put the system together, spec a system, and fit it to a house. And if you're mainly a forced air contractor, you may learn something different than if you're a radiant specialty contractor or other types of heating and cooling. It's possible it's just too vast of vast of a trade to learn all those points.
Boy, I can tell you if I was writing an HVAC textbook, like the first chapter would be on basic thermodynamics, because I still maintain that's, in essence, you're boiling everything you do down to those concepts. You guys are nodding. Maybe I should write an HVAC textbook.
I think you should.
So, Patrick, we'll just assign you a feature about thermodynamics for an upcoming issue.
I'm going to shut up right now.
Well,
Yeah, how many words is that going to need to be?
Well, and it's like, I feel like basic thermodynamics people can understand and comprehend, but like what you need to know to design a system, like, is maybe advanced in a way that there are folks who like study this stuff for their whole lives and are still like learning new things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But just, I don't know. I find it troubling that Ian's heating contractor like doesn't get the fact that the radiant tubing in the ceiling can work just as well as it can in the floor, provided that you have some kind of separation from the outside.
Yeah. It's a little bit like a commercial carpenter who can't build a set of stairs or a deck because, their main focus is commercial interiors and they don't ever have to develop those skills. So that's how I would view it.
Well, I'm happy to hear listener thoughts on this subject because I think we really need to be doing a better job with our HVAC systems. And I'm not talking about just contractors in that trade, but designing them and commissioning them. This is all stuff we do poorly in this country.
Hopefully there's a thermodynamic engineer out there who's sharpening his long letter writing pencil right now.
Mark Gisome, are you listening? We need you, buddy. Come. Hope you're well. This comes from Will. Hi, podcast crew. In your last episode about insulating a basement in a house in Zone 5 outside of Boston, you failed to mention Thermax, which is a foil-faced polyisocyanurate. As long as you leave a capillary break at the floor, a couple of inches of canned spray foam in my case, this can be a good choice. I did this with my 1915 bungalow, which is also outside of Boston. I loaded up the U-Haul with 3.5 inches thick, 3.5 inch thick secondhand sheets and have been insulating an hour here or there for over a year. Will knows. He's my kind of guy. He knows how to live. Most of my time has been spent redoing a poor rim joist job done by an insulation contractor, which I vetted but was still not up to par. Side note, I've been dealing with essentially every single subject you guys talk about on the podcast, from electrification, gutting, oil boiler and radiators, whole home ductless heat pumps, ducting an ERV in an old house, myself using a CRV2, with a whole home inline April air dehumidifier, solar radon, air sealing, etc. Happy to discuss any or all of it with you. Here's one question I got. My oil boiler turned gas hot water heater for a heat pump hot water heater and ductless heat pumps. What? Do you guys know what he's trying to say here?
No.
I think he may have swapped his old oil boiler and gas hot water heater for a heat pump hot water heater and ductless. Maybe he's got one of these Sandens.
I hope so. Will, tell us about that.
Yeah.
He says, I still have to cap one of the flues. The other one is used for a wood stove in case the electricity goes out. I've been debating whether I should completely gut the chimney for more room in the house, chuck down the chimney below the roof line and put in a chase chimney in, or insulate this chimney with extra Thermax I have lying around. There is some spalling on the brick, which is mostly where the old boiler set. This chimney is on insulate without a vapor barrier, but likely does contribute to increased moisture in my basement, given this is likely put in before the rat slab was placed down. Okay, so Will wants to know, should he take down the chimney altogether? Should he bring it down below the roof line? Or should he simply insulate what I'm guessing is the part inside the house to separate it from the rest of his living space? Who wants to take a stab at this?
I would say, given how industrious Will is, he should knock it down.
Yeah.
Andrew, do you agree?
Well, I've been going through the scenario in my head too, because I'm hoping to get rid of my combustion appliances, and even if I get new ones, I can't run them up the chimney anyway.
Because they would be direct vent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I feel like I settled on just bringing it below the roof line and leaving it in place because it will be a lot of work, and like I would gain 4 square feet in one room I use regularly. But I would want to wait until I was also working on the roof because we'll need to seal that
The hole.
penetration.
Yeah. You have to rip the flashing out and then
Yeah.
patch the hole. Jeff, you got thoughts on this?
I agree that kind of taking it below the roof line is almost necessary to make it more more energy efficient, and replacing with a metal flue might be an insulated metal flue for this wood stove.
But
Well, I
taking
think
it any further, that'd just be a glamour project, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean,
Ian, what do you think
Well,
of
I
this?
think it's definitely a glamour project, but it seems like Will is the kind of person who really likes to take it to that degree. When we took the chimney down in our old house, it was because the chimney was standing in the way of us combining 2 rooms that we wanted to combine. So even though it was only a few square feet of space, it was a major obstacle to achieving a better living space in the house. And it's a pretty big base on this chimney in the picture. So, he might gain a decent amount of something somewhere in the house.
And I think if you can do it an hour at a time,
Yeah.
I think this is the perfect project for a work party of some unskilled friends, family members, what have you. They're going to love this. It's going to be super satisfying. You're going to be able to use the brick in some other cool project, like maybe some kind of, feature wall or barbecue, perhaps, if it's hardened brick. Yeah, I'm going to say get rid of this thing.
I think it would really cap off his list of things that he's done to the house that he was rattling off in the middle of his letter. If, taking down a giant chimney all the way down to the basement was on there. Be a nice crowning achievement.
Well, and as you're doing all these energy efficiency things, like, wouldn't it feel good to just like seal a giant hole in your house, at the end of it,
Yeah. I think taking it below the roof would be the minimum. Taking it below the attic floor, if the attic is unconditioned, would be even better, right? Because the attic temperature is going to be virtually the same as outside if the insulation is at the floor level. So you would have a lot of thermal bridging into the house if you took it just down below the roof line. But even better is to just get rid of the whole thing and, why have it be a problem and take up space?
I do appreciate him pointing out that Thermax was in our blind spot
Yeah,
when we were
totally.
talking about that, because that is even the go-to that we use here on all of our crawl space insulating jobs is Thermax.
Is that the insulation material that like has different performance based on the temperature?
Yes. So in super cold temperatures, polyiso does not perform at its stated R value. I think engineers describe it as thermal drift inexplicably. But in like approaching zero, it loses some of its R value. And I think the newer R values for polyiso take that into account somewhat. But
Okay.
But that's where using it on an internal application like Will is doing in his photos is really the perfect use for it. You wouldn't necessarily want to do it as the exterior insulation on your house or my house, and it would really drift off as it got to be 20 below zero.
so one thing people point out correctly is that in thick insulation layers, that is less of a problem because the interior insulation doesn't have the same delta T as the outside face, right? So I've heard folks say it's a big deal in high performance houses, and I've also heard building scientists say, for most of us, don't worry about it.
I want to say there's usually more secondhand polyiso out there because it's used in a lot of like commercial, I think, roofing
yeah.
applications. That's my new thing, is like looking for secondhand rigid insulation. There's a ton of it out there, and it's such a good deal.
Will points out that it will take on water, so you do have to leave a space above your basement floor so it doesn't wick the moisture that's inevitably coming through your concrete slab, unless there's a very good vapor barrier below it. And if your basement is actively taking on water, you can't use this.
Then you have a different problem.
Yeah.
Right.
And as Will points out, you can often leave this exposed because of its foil facing, I'm told. Drew writes in, hello, FH Bay crew. My question is about general floor or wall sheathing. I know the RBC is generally a minimum standard, though in table 602.3 for wood panel structural connections, it lists 8D 2.5 inch by 0.131 diameter nails for 3/8 to 1/2 inch OSB. I have never seen these in the East Tennessee big box store, and rarely 2 3/8. Inspections are mostly up to the AHJ, but what fasteners for 21-degree guns? Upsize to 3 inch by 131 or something like that, since going under the code isn't acceptable. Switching to a paper tape or a coil nailer isn't really an option. Thanks for your help, Drew. So is this just a typo, or does Drew have a different
I think he means
building
IRC.
code? I think
right?
so too. Okay. So what should we tell Drew about his nail problem here?
So I'm going to throw something out there and prep myself for a correction from Mike Gerton or Matt Milham. But I believe that the nailing pattern and spacing is more important than the fastener itself. That said, I looked in our code in Wisconsin, which has its own offshoot based on the IRC, and we have in there the 6D or 6D common nail or 8D box, and then in parentheses it says 2 3/8 inch long by 0.113 diameter, which is the gun nail that everybody sells for a 21-degree gun.
But it doesn't meet the letter of the law. I think you'd agree. 0.113 is not 0.131.
Right, but what I'm saying is in our code lists 0.113, not 0.131 as the diameter, but then it also has every 6 inches on the edges of the panel and every 12 inches in the field to meet the wood structural panel shear rating. So Matt and Mike, fire your corrections away.
I'm going to say that the requirements for nails are poorly enforced, and people use gun nails like as equivalents, and they're not. But if your inspector doesn't raise an issue, it's not an issue, I'm guessing.
It is a fun rabbit hole to dive down when you get into various forums and articles and code inspector forums. There's a lot of meat there about nails and clip nails versus full head nails that probably is not enforced and likely doesn't matter all that much.
I think, as you suggest, it's the spacing and not overdriving them that makes a far bigger difference when I've gone to take things apart. And boy, ring shank nails hold so much better than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, if I remember correctly, ring shank nails are what I used for all of our sheathing that we did on our house. I should have went back and checked my overstock and double checked, but I believe they were ring shank stick nails.
Anyone who's had to pull any number of those out will agree with me when I say they stick pretty good. I'd say what's wrong with going up to a bigger 3-inch nail too? I mean, like, it's the gun is going to drive it no problem, you know. So
Just don't use drywall screws or something like that.
right. And if this is, you know, really an issue, I would ask your local inspector before you start nailing stuff off, because having to go back and re-nail it with some other fastener would be kind of a drag.
Yeah.
We should remind folks, Andrew, that we have the podcast after show coming up, right after this.
Absolutely. It's for our members of Fine Homebuilding. You know, we'd encourage you to become a member if you're not already. But yeah, we get to relax a little bit, talk about the show, and then I ask some probing questions of everyone on the podcast here. So coming up right after this.
I get to sit down. That's fantastic. All right. This is a long one, folks, so bear with me, please. This comes from Ben in Portland, Oregon. Hey, podcast crew. I heard in a recent episode that you needed questions, so I figured I'd send mine over. First, some context. My house is a 1945, 1.5 story with a walkout basement. The half story is really due to a finished attic that's only tall enough because there's a 20-inch step in every floor plane where what was presumably was a carport and then was enclosed and incorporated into the house as an add-on, probably in the 1960s. The basement is only 6 feet tall, which is not tall enough to finish by code, but there is one room on the daylight side at the landing of the stairs that is considered finished because it is because the main floor joists above this area are a series of sister 2x6s spanning almost 12 feet instead of the 2x14s that the rest of the main floor joists are. Needless to say, the kitchen/dining area above is pretty bouncy. The lot is sloped toward the backyard about 20%, and over the years, the house foundation, which is poured concrete on the uphill side except where the carport was, and stick-framed with the stem wall on the daylight side, has significant vertical cracks in at least 2 places on each face, almost certainly due to the backyard side of the house sinking. The whole house slopes about 4 inches front to back, in the 24 to 32 inch span, but don't worry, between this and the bounce in the kitchen/dining area, you'll find your sea legs pretty quickly. When I dug an exploratory hole in the exterior, I never found a footing, just the bottom of the 2-foot stem wall, so that probably explains the sinking. My question: how would you go about replacing the frighteningly inadequate 2x6 joist, about 16 of them, with joists that match the rest of the floor system, 2x14s? Note, from reading the span tables in the code book, I only need 2x12s, but matching the rest makes transitions easier and reduces the needs for shims. The center wall has 2x14s on the other side, so I can rest one end of the joists on that and lap them, but on the exterior, I will need to support the house while I trim down all the exterior wall studs 8 inches and install a new top plate/rim joist. It seems straightforward until I realize that the supports will likely be in the way of installing the new joists. It feels only slightly less complicated than the Towers of Hanoi. I don't get the reference, but maybe you guys do.
I didn't get that reference either.
It's a mental skill game where you have to take a stack of various sized rings from one post and move them to another. And you can only put the smaller rings on top of the larger rings.
Okay.
It's one of those like goofy skill building things. And they get progressively difficult the more rings you have.
Okay, so I want to answer this question because I think I have an easy answer, and maybe you guys will disagree, but why not balloon frame this section with the joist attached to the studs with a ribbon board underneath, right? Then you don't have to cut off the studs and support the house. Is that not a good way to do this?
I think that's exactly how you would do this.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So that's a way easier way than cutting a notch in the house and holding it up while you do this, right?
The other option would just be to triple the 2x6s, and I would say that if they were truly frighteningly inadequate, you would fall through the floor. So they're adequate to a certain point. So you could either triple them, or you could, get LVL material and rip it down and use that to sister it as well. I think you've got a lot of options before you have to start taking the house apart.
Until you get to question
Laminating
two.
plywood on the sides of the. I'm sorry, what's that, Andrew?
Until you get to question two.
Until you get to question two.
You can also laminate plywood on the side of joists for increased strength. And if you put them under tension, put the plywood gussets on, even better, right?
Yeah.
A question two now, right? What would you do with the foundation pieces that are breaking off and floating away like pieces of an iceberg? It's very poetic, isn't it? I've talked to almost a dozen different companies and foundation experts and received almost a dozen different answers. So I figure I could use a few more. Some want to drive piles and to lift and stabilize it, but with the cracks, it's not well waterproofed, though I haven't seen water running in through it yet. The basement slab is cracked as well and needs replacing. Again, also sloped 4 inches. But at this point, I figure I should dig out an extra 18 inches to get the height I need to finish it. My current favorite plan is to jack up the whole house, excavate it, and start fresh. Only one side of it is below grade, so I figure it's half as much work as a full basement. This would give me a chance to provide actual exterior waterproofing and insulation, but I feel like I need to fix the floor joist system before the house is even safe enough to lift. Happy to send along photos. Thanks for all the hard work on the podcast. It's a go-to of mine on longer drives and mind-numbing projects like painting. Oh my God. So you got to fix the foundation before you fix the floor system, right? And I mean, that was the way we did it in Habitat, in these crappy old rehabs, which looked a lot like your house, Ben, frankly. Am I right?
Lift this thing up and blow that foundation out.
I mean,
man.
especially if you've got daylight on one side, like I feel like that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer. He landed on the right choice before he involved us.
Pour a
job,
new
Ben.
footing, do your foundation drain and waterproofing. You can level the house and put the floor system in, all as part of this.
Dig that thing down to like 9 feet deep and get yourself a real nice finished basement under it.
What do you guys think about supporting the house while this is all going on? That was always the part that worried my bosses at Pittsburgh Habitat for Humanity the worst.
I mean, people do this all the time, right? Like it just like looks weird, you know?
It's one of those things that's so counterintuitive until you see it done and you're like, well, duh, yeah, of course it would work that way.
So you crib up railroad ties, right? Or 6x6s to hold up the house?
All depends on how you want to do it. You can put in needle beams and then lift it from points outside of the foundation to allow yourself to dig it out and put a new foundation in. It would just be a better version of those YouTube videos where they show like 400 Amish guys pick up a barn and walk it down the road, set it back down somewhere else.
I'm going to say, Ben, it's easier to replace, part of the foundation than all of it at once, right? So if you could lift up a corner, and use what's remaining to help hold up the house while you're doing this work, you can get yourself in trouble. I think folks listening would agree.
Also, Ben, if you decide to do this, let us know, and I want to take pictures for some content.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be in Portland, Oregon in July. So,
Ben, there you go. Ian's going to help consult on this. He's going to tell you everything you need to do. No
see
problem.
some pictures.
It's funny. This house looks so much like the rehabs we did at Pittsburgh Habitat. On a steep slope, with a walkout basement, with cracked foundations and sloping structural situations. Yeah, it's very much like the janky rehabs we did.
How long does that process take, Patrick, or did it take?
Months.
But not years or anything.
Not years. And, you had to really have the right group of volunteers. It wasn't the situation where you could have 36 college students out and, lift a house.
How many college students does it take to lift a house?
I think it depends on what college. You know?
Okay. Oh yeah, sure.
Oh my goodness. Anyone have anything to add to Ben's answer here?
So, I think he's probably received a bunch of answers that would work at like varying degrees of success, but just if you're doing any kind of like the work you do, you're never going to get that time back. So like go big,
Do it right.
Really fix it.
Yeah.
And then you get an awesome, 9-foot, 8-foot ceiling basement. It like adds a ton of valuable square footage to your house, and especially someplace like Portland where housing prices are really high. A lot of people want to live there. The economics likely make sense.
I'd be tempted to use push piers or helical piers to stabilize the foundation and then build on what you got there, because it eliminates the house supporting in those potentially very risky parts of the job.
I thought you were going to say using a helicopter to lift the house. But yeah.
Oh boy, so stay tuned for the after party, folks. It's gonna be epic.
I love that you called it an after party, and not that it's like 10 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. But
it's probably an insight into my social life, Andrew. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Ian, Andrew, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions. And please, please, please review us, or talk about us somehow on any social media channel where you get us, or on your podcast aggregator. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building. Stay tuned for the after party.